Welcome to the Further Light Podcast, presented by Wisconsin Freemasonry, helping you accomplish your Masonic goals through education and more light. And now, I present to you Brother Chris Ludke.
Listeners, scholars, brothers, this is Brother Chris Lidke, and today I want to explore, the business of being silly, Masonic burlesque degrees. What we're dealing with today are degrees that are outside of the norm, frequently used for satire or simply unofficial degrees, or sometimes for fundraising. But they've existed for a long time, really going back to the original origins of Freemasonry, and they're probably more forgotten burlesque degrees than we have any record of, much less the number that we know about today. And this episode is based on an episode of Symposium that we did recently on Masonic burlesque degrees. Now, if you've been in the craft for a while, you know that we tend to take ritual seriously. We spend months or longer sometimes memorizing the exact placement of every and, but, and if, and comma if you're Brother Pat Choka. But in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, we see this golden age of fraternalism, this period of time where you have the Knights of Pythias, the Oddfellows, the Freemasons. Basically, if you're a male in the United States of good character, you probably belong to one of these organizations, if not one of many others. And at the end of the day, this golden age of Freemasonry sets up a sort of parallel universe of ritual, not just for us, but other fraternal organizations. These were known as side degrees or unofficial degrees. They were often irreverent. They were loud, and frankly, they were designed to make grown men look absolutely ridiculous. But why? Why would a fraternity dedicated to making good men better want to see a brother bark like a dog or swear an oath to a kitchen fork? Today, we're going to explore the menagerie of animal degrees, the sharp wit of satirical degrees, and the profound role that humility plays in the middle of all of that laughter. So let's start with the animal degrees, also known as the catch degrees. In other words, there's usually something here that's going to catch you out. The most common form of burlesque degree is what we call the animal degree. These were almost always catch degrees, meaning the ritual was a giant setup for a punchline, usually for the people in attendance more so than the candidate. Let's start with the yellow dogs, or the ancient and honorable order of the yellow dogs. Perhaps the most famous of these is the yellow dog degree. In the early 1900s, this was a go-to sort of fun degree for after-lodge meetings. The candidate would be brought in, often blindfolded, or led in to believe that he was joining an elite inner circle of Masonry. The ritual manual for the yellow dog, circa 1912, includes this gem of an obligation. I, name, of my own free will and accord, do hereby and hereon most solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will always bark but never bite a brother yellow dog, that I will never lead a brother into a dog pound, and that I will share my last bone with a fellow cur in distress. The catch usually involved the candidate being asked to find his mark, which would lead him to mimic a dog's behavior, lifting a leg or barking at the moon, while initiated brothers get to basically laugh and have fun with this. Then you have orders like the Turtles. While many know this from military history, its roots are deeply fraternal. It's degree based on the purity of mind. To be a turtle, you have to answer 4 riddles that sound like they have naughty answers, but are actually fairly innocent. If you hesitate or give an inappropriate answer, you owe a drink to everyone present. The password, you probably know it, and I'll let you guess. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone. Similarly, the Royal Order of Ducks focused on staying afloat. This comes from Scottish Rite. Candidates were often subjected to trials by water, which usually just meant having a glass of water dumped on them or being quacked at until they bought a round for the flock. Another one, and one that I couldn't find anything on, but I'd be interested in hearing, is the skunk degree. This was something that happened in 2005, 2006, when we were still up in Appleton for annual communication. We all heard about it. We knew that it was happening. The problem is I didn't at the time get the chance to participate. I haven't heard about it since, but it would be very interesting to find out what happens there, or if any of you are aware of what that looked like, at least in Wisconsin. Then we have the satirical degrees. While the animal degrees focused on the candidate's embarrassment, the satirical degrees turn the lens on Masonry itself. They mock the titles, the food, the self-importance that sometimes creeps into the lodge room. This is where we get things like the knife and fork degree. This is the ultimate satire of the kitchen mason, the brother who only shows up when there's a steak dinner. In this mock degree, the working tools are the knife, fork, and spoon. As one satirical pamphlet from the era puts it, the fork is an instrument made use of by operative eaters to secure the succulent morsel, but we, as speculative diners, use it to remind ourselves that we should never let a good meal pass us by, and to stay the stomach against the trials of the long-winded speaker. It mocks the actual Masonic lecture on the working tools, substituting spiritual growth for caloric intake. It is a brilliant way for the lodge to acknowledge its own social appetite. Then we have the water buffalo. Now, this one just recently happened as part of the shrine in Milwaukee. We can't talk about satire without mentioning the water buffalo. While popularized by the Flintstones, it perfectly captured the fraternal obsession with high-sounding titles. In these degrees, brothers would adapt names like Most Potent Grand Poobah of the Mud Puddle. By heightening the titles to the point of absurdity, the members were reminding themselves that outside of the lodge, they're all equals. They're just men in funny hats. It reminds me of the Monty Python skits about the Ministry of Silly Walks, or there's several jokes about Masonic handshakes and the insane lengths that those could go to. Then we have things like the stonecutter degrees, of course, made famous by The Simpsons, picking on Masonry with their famous song about how they hide everything. And this has actually become a degree that's been written and used in lodges in the past. We also see the woodcutter, kind of playing on the stonecutter Masonry connection. And again, ending with the candidate sometimes being fired for incompetence, having to buy their way back in with a round of refreshments for the guilds, but always really picking on those ideas of Masons who oftentimes take themselves a little too seriously. Then, this one coming from Worshipful Brother Jeff Woosley, the Knights of the Quarantine was a unique creature born of necessity that we saw coming out of, it may have dated earlier, there may be an earlier version, but it came out of COVID, and it became an online degree complete with pin and everything else. It was a way to maintain the bond via Zoom meetings and small gatherings, often mocking the secrecy of Freemasonry, or just the fact that, hey, we can't all get together, so let's do something crazy and fun. So let's take a look at these in terms of common themes, common ideas. When we look at these degrees as a whole, from the bark of the yellow dog to the clink of the knife and fork, we find certain recurring themes. First of all, the inversion of the sacred. In Masonry, we have the tiler who guards the door with a sword. In these degrees, the tiler might guard the door with a fly swatter or a wooden spoon. By flipping the sacred into the profane, the brothers find release from the strict decorum that we often see within the lodge. Then there's the in-group bond. These degrees create a secret within a secret, an in-joke. And the fun isn't just the prank, it's the shared experience of having survived the prank. We've all been through it. Once you've been made a turtle, as it were, you are part of the subculture that understands the joke and seeks to pass it on to others or victimize others as you so see it. The levy of charity. Almost every one of these rituals ends with a fine, whether it's a coin for the dog pound or for the duck pond. That money almost always goes to the lodge's charitable fund and the Widows and Orphans Fund. It's a way of having fun. It becomes a fundraiser. The dues of these degrees, of course, can be used for just about anything. And we've seen this in the past, and we see this often in Eastern lodges, Pennsylvania, the Northeast, etc., where these are much more common than in Wisconsin, but it would be a really fun fundraiser and really fun thing to expose the brothers to as something a little bit different on a stated meeting night. Now, the heart of these degrees really boils down to this philosophy of humility. So, why does this matter? Is it just a bunch of guys acting like children? I would argue that these degrees are actually a vital part of Masonic philosophy, specifically humility. Think about it. In the Blue Lodge degree, the candidate is treated with extreme solemnity. He is the center of a profound and ancient drama. It is very easy for a man to walk out of the third degree feeling like he has become someone very important, very special, and perhaps a little superior. The Burlesque degree is really the antidote to that ego. To be a Mason is to subdue your passions. One of the hardest passions to subdue is ultimately pride. The yellow dog says that to the new Mason, yes, you're a master Mason, but you're also a human being who just barked at a fire hydrant in front of 40 people. Don't take yourself terribly seriously. There's an old saying, often attributed to these side degrees. He who cannot endure the laughter of his brethren is not yet a brother, for the heart that is too small for a joke is too small for a great truth. This is the secret work of the burlesque. It tests a man's temperament. If a candidate gets angry during a catch degree, he is showing the lodge that his ego is still out of control. But if he laughs, if he can join the joke at his own expense, he has proven that he truly possesses Masonic humility. Now, we also have the issue of equality. When you deal with something absurd, it gives us equality. In the lodge, we meet upon the level, but in the burlesque degrees, we meet upon the ridiculous. There is no faster way to level the playing field between a CEO and a janitor than to make them both wear paper hats and quack like ducks. The satirical degrees, like the water buffalo or the knife and fork, serve as a sort of memento mori for our titles and honors. They remind us that these things are temporary, that we will move on to be equal with all other men. They remind us that the jewels we wear are nothing but symbols of service, not badges of rank. If you can call yourself your Grand Master a Grand Poobah over a plate of green beans, by the way, that's the letter G in the square and compass. G is for green beans. We have them with every dinner. You are much more likely to remember that he is your brother and not your king. Now, there's a difference between hazing and satire. While they share the goal of humility, the differences are important. Animal degrees are about initiation. They are downward facing. The focus is on the candidate and his willingness to be humbled. Satirical degrees are all about the institution. They are upward facing. Their focus is on the fraternity itself and its potential for pomposity. One is a prank, the other a parody, but both serve to keep the light of Masonry from becoming blinded by its own reflection. What separates these from hazing is it's not a physical ordeal. We're not sitting there making fun of someone. We're bringing them into the in crowd and doing so in a way that is a little bit ridiculous, that requires that ego death or that ability to laugh at oneself. So, what's the legacy? Because, of course, today many of these degrees have faded away. We live in a more professionalized era of Masonry, where we are often worried about how the outside world perceives us. We want to be seen as serious, charitable, and dignified. But I think we lose something when we lose the yellow dog. When we lose the ability to be silly, we risk becoming brittle. At the end of the day, what's the point of being an adult if you can't be childish once in a while? We risk letting the square and compasses become a cold, hard tool rather than a warm, living symbol. The burlesque degrees remind us that brotherly love, including the ability to laugh together, includes the ability to laugh together. They remind us that the most perfect ashlar is the one who is smoothed out not just by the gavel of discipline, but by the sandpaper of a good shared joke. So the next time you're in lodge and things feel a little bit too heavy, a little bit too formal, remember the nights of the quarantine and the Order of the Skunk. Remember that the path to further light sometimes requires us to bark at the moon and realize we're all just faithful curs trying to find our own way home. What is the point of living if we can't laugh a little? We do a lot of serious work. I don't think it does us any harm to play with that sense of humor. To find out what it is to laugh, be laughed at, or laugh at the organization itself. After all, sense of humor is not a bad thing. So until next time, keep your work true, your heart open, and your sense of humor ready. Thank you for joining me, Brother Chris Leakey, and the entire Further Light team on your quest to find more light through Masonry.
Are you interested in learning more about Freemasonry in Wisconsin? Visit wisconsinmasons.org to learn more about Masonry and access further educational content and more light. Once again, that address is wimasons.org. Any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email us at education@wisconsinmasons.org. And thank you for listening.